Hi, everyone. Welcome Facebook land. Welcome YouTube. My name is Amy Blackmore. I'm the executive and artistic director of Mainline Theatre and the Montreal Fringe Festival, the Saint-Ambroise Montreal Fringe. Mon nom est Amy Blackmore. Je suis la directrice générale et artistique du Festival Saint-Ambroise Fringe de Montréal et le Théâtre Mainline. I am so excited that we're doing this. Technology is crazy, and so is the pandemic. Here we are together. This is the first in a series of talks we're going to have all week as part of our transformative series. When we originally started talking about doing this, I really wanted to find a way to bring folks together so that we could just have conversation about what's going on in the world right now, how it's influencing our artistic practice, and more. Later on, at the end, I'll let you know some of the themes that are coming up this week, but you can always go to montrealfringe.ca to check it out. This is not a fringe, but we're still using the Fringe website, so it's okay. We're also using the hashtag FringeBuzz, so if you do have anything you want to say, you can do that. But I want to show you this really cool thing I've discovered. If you make a comment, I might be able to share it on the screen. So there's Deirdre's comment that it's so exciting. Thanks, Deirdre. So I'll be watching those come in. I don't want to speak for much longer because we do have an incredible group here with us. So I think just without further ado, let's bring them in because we're going to talk about what it's like to make art right now. So technology is going to happen. Here we go. Gabe Maharjan is with us. We also have, who's going to show up next? Shanti Gonzales, welcome. We also have Tamiko Manning. Helen Simard, welcome. And finally, Quincy Armorer. This is so awesome. We're all like at home doing our own thing. We never have to leave our houses again because we can hang out on the internet together. So let's do that. No, I'm kidding. Welcome to all of you. Before we dive into our topics, I was hoping that you could all introduce yourselves. Who wants to go first? Let's go for it.
That's a bad way to get the ball rolling on who goes
first. You've won. You're going for it.
I talked first. My name is Tamiko Manning, and I am a Montreal theater creator, actor, mentor. I don't know, person. Yeah, and I've been around for, before the Fringe Montreal was born, actually. Yeah, I know, that old.
That's okay. The Fringe is skipping a year this year, which means we all get to also like skip the year. So next year, the Fringe will still be 30. Whatever age you are this year, you will still be next year. That is how this is working through the pandemic. Yeah. Thank you, Julie. Thanks for being here. Quincy.
Hi, everybody. Hi, I'm Quincy Armorer. I'm an actor, director, instructor, and I am the artistic director of Black Theatre Workshop. Super excited to be here to talk about potentially a big anniversary season. That's not going to be a season like we anticipated it being, which is so many thoughts to share about that. But it's so nice to actually be among some awesome people of the theater, and it's nice to see your faces. Looking forward to chatting for a bit because I miss you all and I miss what we do.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Shanti.
Hello, I'm Shanti. I am a theater artist. I work for the Quebec Drama Federation as the Membership and Communications Coordinator, and I am also an arts educator. And I too am so happy to see these familiar faces. It's like there's like a thing your body does, that sigh of relief kind of thing when you are with the people for the first time again. And I'm like, God, I missed you guys. Nice to see you. Excited to have this conversation.
Thank you. We have a hello from Christine. We have a little heart over here from Leah Jane. Welcome, guys. We're excited for this. Gabe, how about you?
Yeah, my name's Gabe. I am born and raised in Montreal, and I'm a performer, playwright, producer. And yeah, I love making theater, and I definitely miss being able to work and see all of your work in the flesh, like I have been for, you know, my time. And yeah, I'm just looking forward to see what's being created nonetheless. And this not having a fringe is kind of strange for me. I mean, in the past, I've done like 3 fringe shows in the past 3 years, so it's just like a kind of interesting, like, no fringe now it's not what I'm used to with my Junes, but we're here.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much. And last but not least, Helen Simard.
Hi, everybody. I'm Helen Simard. I am a choreographer and dance dramaturg and general art making person. Yeah, and it's very strange to be in the business of being people together in public when you can't bring people together in public. So I've been living this pandemic strangely and wondering what the thing we do is without an audience, and what it is without proximity and connection, and all the magic and the experience of being in a theater together.
Yeah, totally. Thank you. Thank you all. Here's another fun one. Thanks, Craig. I like those. You know, it's funny, on March 14th in the afternoon, that was when we received an email at Mainline from the government letting us know that we could not have performances that evening. And, you know, I'll never forget, you know, walking into the Mini Main, canceling that show, which was sold out. Same thing for the main space. And just kind of digesting that information that night. And I don't know that any of us realized or knew then that we would still be in that boat now. I know for myself, it's been very day by day. It's been difficult to make plans. I'm curious to know, maybe first of all, if you are still making art right now, and what that process has been like for you.
I'll speak a little. So I'm lucky enough to be working with Night Swimming Theatre. They're based in Toronto, and they have this initiative called the 5x25, where they have commissioned an artist very specifically born in 1995. So very specific grants for the win. But I'm lucky enough to, with their support, be developing some plays right now, and that hasn't stopped. But what's interesting is, like, it shifts and it transforms a bit, because I find that I'm working on 2 specific pieces with them. One piece I was working on a lot more before the pandemic, and it's like in my head, it's situated like in like 1998. So the pandemic doesn't really complicate that, but like accessing the before is complicated. And so I'm kind of like letting it like slow cook right now. And the other one kind of came out of the pandemic, and like is this piece kind of, it's very like, I don't know. I'm a person that I find my energy through joy, and I'm really like actively committing to that as an intention. And I've been coming to into an identity of really loving theater for young audiences and finding my joy through young audiences. And there are these kids in my neighborhood, and I would not see them because they'd be at school and I'd be at work, but they hang out in their magnolia tree like all the time. And I'm just like, oh my God, what a beautiful like distancing friendship that they have built with me and my roommate and some of the people across the balconies. We have this really like pretty Ruelle community. And yeah, so that's been really inspiring to me, actually. And I'm just kind of writing that small world and the small communities, because I find our world has grown smaller, and in a way that's kind of nice. It's like when you bring your attention inward, and you're paying attention to like small breath and small things, because small actually, maybe, I don't know, for me, I feel like it has impact, and I feel like for me it's honest as an artist, and I think it will be impactful for people, and perhaps young people, to see that reality reflected too. So that's where I'm finding that's like the work creatively that I'm doing in the context of theater right now, which is pretty cool. I like it. I'm very fortunate.
That's interesting how you're finding the closeness with your neighbors. And I'm curious, you know, is everyone online more or less? Because I'm finding I'm seeing more neighbors, but are we also just connecting more online at the same time, like these polar opposites?
Yeah, I've had well, when things first started, when we first had to go into isolation, actually, I was saying to Helen before that her project was the last project that I was working on as we were sort of moving like through the state of emergency. And so I kind of feel like seeing her again is this really weird, because it's been almost 3 months and it's just this really weird thing. But I was still mentoring with the BTW AMP program and Artista through Imago. And so we moved everything online, which was quite incredible. We didn't think that we were unsure of how it was gonna go, but I think that it worked quite well. And I was actually connecting to my mentees a lot more online. And I think a part of that was because all of the other jobs kind of disappeared. And so I had, so that was the one thing that I could actually focus all of my time on. And so I really enjoyed being able to sort of meet up with people more than I would have normally. As far as like family, I've connected with family and friends probably more than I normally would as well. And it's really nice because we can connect with people who are quite far away. Hi, Quincy.
You're back.
Hey guys, sorry about that. Internet.
This is what's happening. We get kicked out of Zoom meetings. You know, that's part of the deal.
Yeah. It's funny how that's kind of been like at the beginning. It was really stressful. Like, oh my God, what if I get kicked off? What if I can't hear anything? What if like my, the screen goes dark? And now it's just like, whatever, like it happens to everybody.
Yeah, pretty much, right? Or like the FaceTime not working, or, I'm fine that I'm like texting, FaceTiming, Slacking, live streaming, every possible way of communicating with Kenny, I will communicate with him within like an hour. It's kind of out of control. Helen, I feel like you've been rehearsing, and I'm curious how the rehearsal process is going.
Yeah, well, it was right when the shutdown happened. I was right in the middle of two projects. One that Julie mentioned was a play workshop that we were developing, and that one we were able to wrap up kind of just as things locked down. But the other project I was in was kind of in the middle of a first research process for a trio I'm creating for 3 street dancers that's supposed to premiere in the fall. And the idea of the project at the base is that we're creating a solo for each one of these dancers. And so after the first few weeks, when we realized that the confinement was going to last, I was like, well, our show in the fall hasn't been canceled yet. And so we have to move our research forward. And so we have to start rehearsing online because we have to have some material, hoping we can get back into studio someday. We have to advance the first stages of research to kind of know what direction we're going in. And so the confinement actually worked with the form of the project. And I started out by working with the dancers one at a time through Zoom. What was super fascinating about it was that I just had to trust them so inherently, because I would give them tasks, or I would give them research threads that I wanted them to take, or improv tasks, and I would give them an hour and a half to work on it, and then we would check back in and I would see what they had worked on. And so it was really exciting because I wasn't able to control at all what direction my own research went in, because I had to trust that they were going to take it in a direction that was meaningful to them. Because to me, it was very important that the work had to be meaningful if we were going to keep doing it.
Yeah.
And that's a huge question for me, with the whole push to immediately move everything online and to have all these new programs to just produce. For me, if it's not meaningful for me as an artist, if it's not meaningful for the performers, then it's not going to be meaningful for audiences. And so I kind of had to really follow their instincts and listen to what they found interesting and to what I proposed to them. And I'm really actually excited about the direction the research is going. And because the show was imagined as 3 solos that eventually would be performed at the same time, now we're wondering, will they be performed one at a time if we're not allowed to have 3 performers on stage together? Would they have to do a mix of live and live stream? And we've been considering all these questions. We're thinking about maybe building a social distancing set to have a barrier between the audience and the performers. Just because I'm like, if I'm gonna have these des contraintes sur mon processus, like if I'm gonna have these obstacles, I want to make aesthetic choices based on those obstacles and not just see them as problems. I want to see them as spaces for new solutions. So it's actually been a really rewarding process so far, and we are all excited at the prospect of being able to meet up again. But for the moment, I'm actually really, really, really curious to see what type of show comes out of this strange collective confinement we've gone through, and how it will speak to audiences without explicitly making a COVID show. COVID has informed me as a person, and so therefore my process, and then therefore the work that I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
And there's something just to close on that. What I realized right away I hated about teleconferencing platforms is that as artists, so much of our work is being in a space with other people in their intimacy, in their vulnerability, in their creativity, and we're not always talking about things and naming them. Sometimes we're just being together and connecting on a more like visceral or empathetic level. And so being able to be in Zoom calls where I just get to witness people dancing has made me like Zoom. I really was having the Zoom exhaustion, and now I'm excited to get on and just be with people in that vulnerability. So it's very exciting.
Thank you. Yeah, I found it's hard to like peel off that layer and just kind of sit in front of your screen. I appreciate that. And also it's really interesting what you're saying about set design and bringing that in. I was talking to Arez, who runs the Frigid Festival in New York, and he has a venue, and he's been talking about just getting all this plexiglass and putting it all over the stage so you can have 6 people on stage at once performing it in his space, and then also plexiglass between the performers and the audience, and having that be a real possibility. Quincy, you're back. My goodness.
I'm on a different device now. I apologize in advance. After the fact, if I get kicked off again, I won't interrupt by coming back in, but I think we're going to be good now. I can hear everything. The static is gone.
Great.
We should be fine.
That's great. Well, it's perfect. So I wanted to ask you, I mean, as an artistic director who presents a season, did you have shows that were canceled? And I'm curious if you can talk about how you reacted to that and your feelings of online related. Oh, darn. Well, we can come back to Quincy. I didn't get to see the amped.
Well, I'll say this. I got.
You're back. You're back. Me? Go for it.
I think I'm back.
Yeah, you are.
I think I'm back. I think I'm back. I think I'm back.
Good,
I think
you
I'm
are.
Back. So hard to tell. I'm not hearing anything right now, Amy, but I know that you were asking about what we had to cancel and talking about. So I'll just rip on that for a second. You can hear me. We cancel.
Oh, no. Oh no. This happens. Gabe, I think you're gonna have to take it. How has your experience been since we've been locked down?
Yeah, well, I just talking about Black Theatre Workshop and AMP. I did get to see their outcome. I don't remember what days are anymore, but it was definitely not that long ago, a couple of days ago. And I also saw the Artista one earlier, a few weeks ago. So those are both pieces that were just very exciting to watch. Both in different ways, but just seeing how people are utilizing the medium. Helen, I like what you said about not looking at the obstacles that are presented in switching to this medium as problems, but looking at them more as like just parts of the form and looking at how that informs the art. it's been really interesting just seeing how people have been, you know, bringing theater online and what that looks like. And I've been working on a show. It was something that I started working on at the beginning of the year through the Emerging Creators Unit at Buddies in Toronto with Be Current Theatre. And it was a piece that me and my friend Helen Simard, we were writing it together. We went to theater school and we've done work together, but we had this idea of just writing this show about trans individuals and show like a community of trans people and just exploring all of their relationships interpersonally, but also all with the underlying theme of cash and money and what it means to live in a world of capital. And so we had that show, we were working on the script and we were supposed to present it. Originally, it was going to be last week or 2 weeks ago. We were going to present it at Buddies, but obviously we're here. But it kind of worked out for us because the script that we were writing, it's composed of these monologues, and they were originally these pieces of characters talking to people not face to face. They varied. Some were phone calls, some were FaceTime conversations, but they were already playing with this idea of disconnect and seeing how people connect from distance. And that was before any of this kind of came into effect in our lives. So we just kind of were like, this seems to be something that could work for this kind of medium. So we've been working on it since March, essentially adapting it for this form. And we have it, we'll be doing a live presentation of it on June 30th at 8 p.m. That's what we're gearing up to, but it's, yeah, there's more information to come out. We're just about to start releasing more stuff on it, but it's called E-Transfers, and it's, yeah, I'm excited for it.
That's awesome.
But I think all that to say though, definitely, like, even though it is still theater and it's trying to capture what theater is online, it is also its own thing, you know, just in the same way that you can have theater in so many different types of theater spaces. A show that's in the round is not the same thing that's in a huge proscenium, is not the same thing that's in a tiny little black box. They all have their own feeling. And this also, we're using open broadcasting system software, which some people might know and use, and we've kind of realized that is in a way our stage more than anything, and it's really exciting.
That sounds really exciting, and it's, you know, I wrote the question down as you were talking, but is it still the performing arts if it's online? Is it still theater? You know, what is the definition of live? I'm curious if anyone has any thoughts about that.
I would say the grant language that I've been using in terms of applications is virtual performance experience or digital performance experience. But
I'm writing that one down.
Well, I think it's so interesting because it does come back to the comment of like constraints, not as obstacle, but perhaps as space for opportunity. And especially like as artists in the before, like we are very used to being resourceful. We're very used to coming up upon a roadblock and being like, all right, time to swerve. Let's do it. And so this is one of those moments, because like something that I'm really carrying as I like conceptualize these ideas of what are the performing arts is the fact that like this isn't like a hiccup. It's not a speed bump. Like this is like the societal equivalent of like those big watershed moments in an individual life where it's like, did I get on the train or not? Did I do that? Where your life could have gone in a completely different direction. Like for me, when I moved to Montreal 8 years ago, like my choice was Montreal or New Orleans. And like, I don't know who that girl is who moved to New Orleans, but it's like that flip of a coin in that moment changed the direction of my life. And this is going to change the direction of our society in such a way. And so like bearing that gravity and like, and being present with it, understanding that the plans that we had, the understandings that we had are no longer like, it's just, we gotta refocus, and we're good at that, you know, and we're good at taking care and understanding like that refocus is a process. And so for me, like I got to be part of this really cool thing this past week. It was like the Sprint Créative, and it was in partnership with Maison Théâtre. And we're like this creative think tank with like 30 professionals from very different backgrounds. Like I was one of the only theater people, it felt like. I was also one of the only Anglophones. It was a very like it was on the French side, but engaging this question and like with funding, like with resources, engaging this question of how do we bring performing arts to kids in the context of the pandemic, like come like fall 2020. And for me, something that really stuck is like, perhaps it isn't theater. Perhaps it's not theater if we're not body to body, like that intimacy, that exchange that happens on those other sensorial levels obviously isn't happening via Zoom. But what is performing arts? I think that's a really interesting question, because I think there still is this aspect of performance and of self-performance and of self-awareness and of exhaustion and all of these new like logistics and governing factors of how we perform, either like via Zoom or in distance, like on balconies or whatever. Like we're gonna find really cool new ways. And I think that this is like, personally, I have this desire for theater to evolve. Like for me, theater is like, I want it to be like street food, but in the way where it's like street food doesn't have to stay the same for hundreds of years. In some ways, like that's really valuable. But for me, I'm like, if I'm a street food cook and I go visit somewhere else and I want to bring that influence into my creativity, that is still street food and it is still valid, and thus it transforms, and perhaps someday it will be very unrecognizable from what it once was. But that is the beauty of cultural like evolution, right? And I'm like, this is like the kick in the ass that we needed to evolve theater into something that we may not even call theater, but I'm like, I'm excited for it. I'm like, let's rock, let's go. That's how I feel, at least.
I'm totally like digging your energy. This is wonderful. Thank you for sharing all of that, Gabe.
Yeah, I totally love what you're saying, Shanti, about like this, just, you know, because I think as artists, we really, our practice, you know, interdisciplinary is something that's thrown around a lot, but I think in a certain way, it's inherent to most art practices, because even if you're just working, even just as a performer, you know, if you have experience in a certain form like clown, but you also do work as a dancer, and you also do work in these different ways, they're all different tools and they're all different lessons that you do, and they're all things that you learn in different spaces as well. Like taking a workshop on something like a method of clown is something that you do to, as a performer, you know, learn that, put that tool into your toolbox. And I've kind of taken on this, like I'm trying to approach this in the same way, looking at this as another just tool as an artist. And in that idea of also, you know, looking to people who do this and learning from them, I feel like this is just something I've heard a lot of people refer to this as a new art form or a new medium, which in certain ways it is, because as theater people, we are used to physical space, and so this is new for us. But there have been people who have been, you know, there's the YouTube community and the Twitch community and all these streaming communities that have been making livings out of this, and drawing huge audiences in for years since before this. So in a certain way, approaching this, I was like, how do they do it? How do they stream? Because that, in like any other form, you have to kind of learn from people who are doing it, and then just kind of try your hand at it and see what you bring to it. But that idea of taking different kinds of flavors and styles and food and just bringing it all into your kitchen, that's what we do as artists.
And I think, to me, like, just to bounce off what Gabe was just saying, is that there's questions for me around arts institutions rushing to almost validate or say innovative practices that have been around for a long time outside of a mainstream or institutionalized art circuit. YouTube exists. It is a practice. It is creative. It is a form. It has its own rules and its own audience. And I doubt that before this, there would have been grants available for YouTube streams. But now all of a sudden there's something, because of the pandemic, that it's been validated as this artistic practice that is worthy of funding. And I have questions around that. I have questions around, why do things have to go through institutionalized places in order to become seen as high art as opposed to entertainment? And at the same time, I have a lot of questions about the language that's being used about why we need to support artists right now, and how it often comes back to entertainment or that, you know, wonderful French word divertissement, which means entertainment and diversion. And I don't think that I want to make work right now that's a diversion. I think that we have an opportunity to see a lot of what's going on in the world very clearly right now, because we've all paused. And I don't want to be part of making noise to cover that cause up. I want to make work that actually helps change our perception of the world and hopefully makes the world a more caring, more compassionate, more just place. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. There's so many layers these days, you know, there's the pandemic, racism, mental health, like there's a lot going on. I want to read some of the comments actually that are coming in. First of all, shout out to those who are watching on YouTube, because that is an option. Welcome. Kate Nowacki really likes the e-transfers. So there you go. Good name, e-transfers. And Leah Jane, I like what Gabe said. Digital performance is a different art form than theater. Also, a music concert is different than watching an online music video or online live artist. It's just different. Thank you. And maybe lastly, we'll share what Samantha had to say. These ideas offer up the thought, perhaps this is the moment to bring more performance art into the mainstream theater. Thank you. What kind of art do we want to make now? What kind of art do you want to make? It's interesting how I've heard about some of your projects evolving and shifting. Everybody's using the word pivot right now, so, and pivoting, I'll say it too. But maybe looking ahead beyond, what are you curious about now?
Well, I want to say something that's so like deep in my heart right now too, which is just that like I am an artist in my soul and I do lots of artistic things, but I'm also kind of like heck art right now to a certain extent because there's so much other work to do. And like I think art can like add to that work, but I think that in this pandemic space, like especially in the first little while, there was this like really intense like fear that without productivity, we are worth nothing because we live in a capitalist society. And so we were like, oh my God, we have all this time. It feels horrible. But now that we have all this time, like that's the reason that finally like white supremacy is getting the attention that it needs, is because people aren't working 40-hour weeks or 60-hour weeks in our case, or like, you know, people have the time to actually participate politically, to educate themselves, to et cetera, et cetera. And this is an opportunity to do stuff that grows us as humans. And when it like, and everyone's priorities are different, you know, like, and I have a lot of respect for that. Like some days I wake up and I'm like, I got to make art today. And some days I wake up and I'm like, don't say the word art to me. And both of those are super valid ways of being. And like, for me, I think if I zoom out, largely this moment is about educating myself, advocacy and activism. And also like, I'm working on like gaining hard skills outside of the arts, because like I'm trying to free myself from the constraints of precarity. I think better art comes out of not being precarious, and I want to put voice to that. So I'm like, I'm working on hard skills. I'm working on learning how to program. I'm working how to find concrete ways so that my voice can be heard in very significant ways and part of this moment. And so like, when I think about art making more largely, I'm like, there will be a moment where it's not as intense as this moment, and I will know what art I want to make then. And that is a future Shanti. She's got that. I trust her. And current Shanti right now is like, what are ways that I can serve my community? Because a stronger community, a community that is served, will help us as a smaller community within a bigger community. We will make better art. But right now, our community needs us in a much more urgent way, in my view. And that's where I'm putting my energy, because that's where my heart is, I think.
Mm-hmm. You know, Julie, one of the, I kind of want to leave space to that thought. Thank you, Shanti, for all of that. One of the first things I saw when all this began, of course, were your, I can't remember what they're called, isolation solo dance parties online that you've been hosting. And I was really inspired when I saw that, because it is a way to bring people together outside of perhaps an artistic practice, definitely serving community. And you're such a big advocate for the community. I'm curious to hear a little bit about that.
I think when it started, it actually was something that was just incredibly selfish. I think it was in the first week of isolation, and I was finding myself incredibly untethered and completely uncreative, and really needing to connect with anybody. And so I was finding myself just kind of spiraling down into a depression. And I'm not normally a depressive person, but I think that everything just, I mean, I was the same for all of us. All like this big, huge wall just came smashing down in front of our entire lives. So I thought, you know, I felt like connecting with my community and my friends, and I felt like having a schedule to at least one thing. So I thought 6:30, dance, just have fun, and it's really only room for that, to connect and to find joy with the people dancing in their own living rooms. And that was really the only way that I was going to be able to connect with anybody, was to go like, I can imagine Amy Blackmore dancing with me in her living room. And so as it continued, people started bringing on their kids and their pets and their roommates and their lovers, and it actually became this really beautiful example of community. It brings me so much joy to watch people dancing, but also to just dance with them. And I think that that's, like Shanti was saying, that I think we're really feeling how non-essential we are as artists. And that, for me personally, because I didn't have any pressing projects at the time we went into isolation, it kind of made me feel like there was no need for me. And so the first month, I think all I did was make masks and for other people in the community, and host these dance parties. And that was the only way that I could actually find a way through and fulfill that need to be of service, like Shanti was saying, to the community, and to to people I knew, and to people who I don't know. And so that's been a really great lifeline for me. And then going forward in this, I think that now I have a lot more room in my head and my heart to actually start creating again, and to want to create again. You know, to actually to take that time to find my feet and to reconnect with my community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. I feel like something that's really struck me is that the thing that will have to be radically different for me moving forward is that I realize that, you know, 98% of my work is the process, and then 2% of the work is the show. But we've set up this system that only puts value and only puts monetary compensation often on the show. And so the thing that I miss isn't doing shows, it's creativity and being together and making together and finding problems and finding solutions for those problems, and allowing that creativity to take us in directions we couldn't imagine. And that, for me, the whole discussion about when can we have live performances again is so absurd, because I'm like, when can I be in a space with another human being and solve problems together? That's what I want to do. And now they've said next week we can do shows. Well, how can we do shows if we don't have time to identify problems to find solutions for? And so I think what I've realized is that I have to figure out an approach in my art making practice that allows me to put more value on the process, and then also allows me to share the process continuously, because that's actually my work. My work is the research, is the process, is the art making part. It's not a show. And actually the show, because I don't perform in my own work, the show has absolutely nothing to do with me. Once the show's made, I can't do anything. So I'm excited for shows to happen again, so that the dancers and actors I work with will have employment, and the technicians that I work with will have employment. But I think, can we also think of ways of doing that work and maybe putting a value on the invisible part of our work, and saying maybe we can pull the curtain back and share a bit of the dirty part, and a bit of the messiness, and a bit of the rawness, and a bit of the place where the show it hasn't gelled yet, because that's actually more exciting in a way than once it's a fixed solid thing that yeah is set in stone. I also have to figure out a way of making art that allows me to sleep 8 hours a night, because now that I'm used to that, there's never going back to, you know, all-nighters to finish a grant or whatnot. And I think that I'm hoping that our industry will be a bit healthier in terms of work-life balance.
Yeah, I think it's on us. We got to insist upon that. Like, we have been confronted with the ways in which maybe our care practices were not there. And it's our job to not be complacent and to be like, no, I deserve 8 hours a night. I deserve a weekend. I deserve to shut off my computer and put off, like, you know, in the ways that we create Zoom accessibility. Like, I can turn off my video if I need a second, or like whatever, that we carry that with us. And that is ours. We earned it. Never forget that, any of us, including me.
There's also been, though, I've been thinking about time. I mean, obviously, but being in isolation and doing everything over Zoom or email or text or phone calls or whatever, I find that I've not been giving myself the time in between that I normally would have had by walking to the next meeting, or, you know, taking the metro to rehearsal or whatever it is. And so you have that time to regenerate, to think, to not think at all. And I find that because I'm at home at my desk, I can go, I'm going to do this meeting from 3 to 5. And then from 5 to 7, I'm going to do another meeting. And then from 7 to, you know what I mean? So I think that's also something we have to be really careful of if we start making art through this medium. Well, we will in our different ways. But I think that self-care also has to be thought of differently, because we're working with different tools. And, like, you know, my couch to take a nap is right over there. So, you know, so you kind of have to, like, figure out, like, balance just the willpower to work, but also to not sit in front of your computer for 14 hours a day, or whatever it is, because it's exhausting. And the process, like what you were saying before, Helen, I find that having all of this time, I really start thinking, where was the joy? Like, where's the joy now? And where was the joy before? And if there wasn't any joy before, then how can I change that and go forward into this new way of creating, like, actually bring forth that joy that we all have? And I think that because we work so much, that we kind of forget about bringing that joy with us. So, you know, whether it lives in 5 minutes in an isolation dance, or going to take a nap on the couch.
I think too, like with what you're saying, Julie, and also Shanti, what you brought up earlier about, like, just taking the time to just do other things and take on other skills and projects. And Julie, you're talking about doing community stuff. I think there is a certain, you know, silver lining in the fact that we have this break. There's definitely a certain kind of, like, privilege that I think it takes to also be able to relax and be like, okay, like, even though the world is where it's at and our work is precarious as it's always been, and, you know, seemingly, like, just not gonna happen in the ways we've known it for who knows how long, there is also kind of the gift of being able to sit back and reflect. And I think with everything that's going on in the world, I mean, none of it's new stuff, of course. It's all stuff that's been around for too long. But I think there's an opportunity to personally, I think whether you're an artist or in any sort of whatever you do for a living, taking that time to reflect on learning and unlearning is very important. And this is a great time to do it. And I think part of that, as artists, especially as freelance artists who work with institutions, but also, you know, we butterfly around, and it's really much more of a community than it is an employer, but to also question the systems that allow us to work, you know? Helen's right about the whole 2%, 98% of, you know, what is the work. And even though there's a lot of importance on the show, and there's a lot of, it's like the crux in some points of what we're doing, everything else happens before that and leading up to that, and how that happens, who gets to make certain decisions, who gets included in the room and excluded from the room. Those are all things that, especially since all these institutions are largely on pause, I feel like it's the time to also reflect as bodies and as people who are part of these larger institutions, be like, what does it mean to the work that I was doing now that I'm not doing it? What was I actually doing and what wasn't I doing? I think there's so many different roles as freelance artists that we can look at that like just the work that we do artistically. I work on the board for, well, I volunteer for the board of the Quebec Drama Federation. So thinking about that, there's still work being done. Shanti works there and Amy's on the board with me. And it's really, I love being there. And even though being there means being here, continuing that work, and then just also seeing, you know, the other communities and the other places within the community that we work with, and just visioning how we want them to look when we get back there. What could be better about them, because we could do a lot more for sure, and that's the gift of now.
Yeah, you know, that makes me think about, and like something that I'm hearing a lot, like, is the word in different ways, but the word value and values. And like, this is a moment where we are coming face to face with the value structures that previously existed, that valued us, and also the ways in which we value ourselves, and the ways in which that we set the boundaries based on how we value ourselves of certain things. And to me, like, something that I think a lot about is the privilege of having chosen to do theater, and like doing theater or the performing arts in general. To be a freelance artist is a great privilege that we opt into. And thus we have to take responsibility for the fact that we opt into some of the precarity. And every time we sign a contract with an organization that may be a little less than savory, we are opting into that in certain ways. And we have the power to opt to do things differently. And I think it's really important. Speaking of values, is I find for me, like, I'm always self-working. I've got stacks of journals. Like, I'm trying to like really figure myself out. And one of the things is that I found I got stuck in this loop where like, I was like, well, I'm a theater artist and I'm only a theater artist and my skills aren't transferable or something like that. Heck no. Our skills as theater artists are both valuable in the art that we make and continue to make that will serve our community, but also those skills transfer very directly into ways that we can very immediately serve our community during this period of like dark room, what is that called when the day is dark, the Monday, dark days. There it is. I forget all the theater vocab, LOL. But I'm like, this is, sorry.
No, sorry, continue.
Just like, if the stage is dark, let's use our skills elsewhere, because as artists, our job is also to observe, and that grows us as artists and grows our ability to evoke life, right? So we need to live life to do that. So let's use our skills as communicators, as facilitators, as agents in our community to serve our community in ways that we've never dreamed of, because that connection with our community not only benefits our community, but will benefit us later when people remember when we showed up. And they will come into our theaters in a completely different way if we really join hands with the rest of Montreal, with the rest of Quebec, Canada, etc. And so for me, I'm like, rest is so important. Oh, I love rest. But I'm like, this is not off. You know, like our skills are still usable, and you deserve to value yourself enough. Invisible you deserve to value yourself enough to understand the ways that you are so useful and so essential. You just have to have the audacity to imagine how that can happen.
I just wanted to quickly say that this is probably a really good time, because all of the institutions that we're talking about, you know, you go in, you sit down, you watch a piece of theater, and it's traditional, and sometimes it's maybe not as traditional. And so this is probably a really great time to start proposing new ideas, because these theaters are being forced to look at how they present in a different way. So you've got all of these venues that are kind of going like, well, we can't do it the way that we used to do it. Like, we can't do it how we did it last year or like in February. So I would love to encourage artists to, you know, make proposals to those artistic directors and say, look, I have this way of looking at art, bring it onto the stairs, bring it into the street, bring it into, you know, my home or whatever it is through Zoom. And yeah, I would love to, I can't wait to see how we go forward as a community and how we can maybe break some of those bubbles around the institutions. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know that we only have a minute left, so.
Thank you. You know, it's interesting, the grant agencies, they're all kind of rolling out new money for some new ideas, digital or not, dancing in the streets. I'm curious if any of you have looked into them. I know I have one that's open that I may or may not get in today. What's your feeling? What are you hearing? How are people reacting to that?
I think there's a range for sure. There's I haven't seen all of it. I'm sure there's stuff that I'm unaware of. But there's some stuff that's really exciting about it. It is like nice to see just support to continue making art, that there is a desire of that in our society, especially in Quebec. I think that's something that we're really we are fortunate for that as artists. There are also some disconnects, I think, in terms of how artists are ready to approach work and also what it means to approach work. Again, that whole idea of, you know, if we have to put a proposal in to produce a show that might happen in August or September, pending, you know, not having everybody close again. And then we have to make these, you know, agreements with other artists and we have to start putting the work in now. What if it doesn't happen in the end? That's still labor. And I think especially for a lot of institutions, it's not like money's lying around to just put in that extra labor now if we can't approach it securely and knowing what we're doing. I'm not against continuing art in this time at all. I think there's so many different ways to do it, but I think it's always better to have more conversations between the artists and, you know, the bodies that are helping us make our work.
Yeah.
I just want to say too, like, I want to see sustainable gestures, like in the realm of like granting us to make online work or whatever. Like, I feel like I'm seeing a lot, and at the beginning I felt this more, but I felt turned off sometimes by grants because it felt like a knee-jerk sort of like, well, here, just do this right now, you know, kind of thing. And I'm like, or like even in the context of how organizations are taking responsibility for white supremacy. Like, I feel like there's a lot of like, here's immediate reparations, like just right now, for this, here you go, now, good. And I'm like, no, I want to see how you're going to keep doing this work. Like, I don't want to see a one-off kind of thing, like little like Black Lives Matter post. I want to see how every year you're going to work this into your programming. And in terms of like grants, like we know what we know, and we know that. So I want to see that work with grant team and like the required understanding of what you are investing in, because we're not investing in art as it existed before. And I really want the money to like be given with the understanding that this is an investment in a development that's going to go in a direction that we don't know. And I want to see organizations really take responsibility for the we don't know, but we're going to do our heckin' best on the thing, both in the realm of COVID, sustainability art, and in the realm of taking responsibility for the white supremacy.
I think as we oh, sorry, Gabe, go ahead.
Oh, I just to jump onto what Shanti just said about also like looking at how how we make art, and specifically in terms of just racism in our systems that exist. Theater's not excluded from that, and I think in terms of how institutions run, it's also important to look at like how they've been running, even subconsciously often, but in terms of like question what's the makeup of your board, how white is it, or how diverse is it, how many people of color, and just from different communities as well. I think there's a lot of diversity in theater that we celebrate in the performance level and in what's visible, and that's really important. but also a lot of our institutions have been around for a while, and no one is everyone's prone to nepotism in some way. But being aware of that and being aware of like where we can kind of make space where there hasn't been space given so far when we reopen, like that is, I think, of the utmost important as artists who work with institutions and as artists working for institutions. It's all of our responsibilities.
And I think it's important too, just in the thought of sustainability, to not fall into the trap of making a lot of quickly made, poorly thought out art just to fill a void. I don't want to see a bunch of fast food art being made. And I feel like there's a lot of fast food art being asked to be made right now. A lot of poorly thought out programs with poorly thought out projects from artists that might have no impact, because let's be honest, my digital reach on YouTube is not anywhere near a YouTuber's. So I can take a grant and make a YouTube video, and maybe 100 people will watch it, maybe 200 people. You know, where's the work in investing and making sure, if we're going to invest in these forms, that we're investing in audience development so that the work does have a reach and isn't just a bunch of cheap plastic from the dollar store that falls apart.
Yeah. Well, and I think on that note, we could talk for hours, but we've promised 1 hour. Unfortunately, Quincy's internet just wouldn't let him back in, so we'll have to have him join another talk. Any final thoughts that anyone would like to share before I wrap us up? All right.
I just love talking to all of you. I miss talking to you, and it's so nice too. I'm just very thankful for this.
Yeah, I'm just blown away by everybody's reflection and empathy and realness in this. So thanks for having an actual profound discussion about the importance of what we do or not.
I would like to say one more thing, and it has to do with what Gabe and Shanti you're talking about theater companies who are sort of quickly putting it out there, talking about white supremacy. And I think that as difficult as it is, and I think it's important that some of us take on some responsibility because we're all friends, we're all connected, we're all like, within 1 degree of each other. And if we, I think that the way forward is through one-on-ones, because we're all friends. And so if we see that someone is perhaps doing what you're talking about, just sort of throwing that out there and, hashtag Black Lives Matter, if we continue to be vigilant, and I'm not asking for people to do the work because it's really hard work, but those of us who can and have some energy to do it, I think that it is on us to sort of be vigilant with our friends, so that we can move forward. And yeah.
Yeah, I would like to just interact with that, and also in terms of wrapping up the space, this is a moment that I think, at least for me, I feel like it is asking great tenderness of me toward the world, toward myself, toward my communities, and this kind of compassion for all of the work that is happening right now. And the fact that we are all operating with an immense amount of weight that has never been before on us in this kind of intensity and this kind of immediacy. And I guess as we move forward, we have to carry that hope. We have to carry that insistence, that drive, that conviction, while also understanding and being real with ourselves when it's I can't put in a 40-hour work week the way I did before because I have a headache from all of the other stuff that's going on right now. And understanding the pace is different. The work is different. One-on-ones is an excellent suggestion because that is where real, tender, compassionate work can happen. I personally, I feel very turned off by call-out culture. I don't think that is always the best way forward. I mean, this is this moment where everybody is kind of call-outs are kind of a way that people are getting heard, and that's happening. But I'm this is a moment about being tender and compassionate with each other, with ourselves, but also like insisting on the fact that we are going to grow through this. And so investing in that growth, investing in ourselves, each other, our art, our communities, that is what will bring us joy, will bring us freshness, like replenishment, and that will in turn make our art so much better. So it's a time of responsibility and reflection and tenderness. And thank you guys so much for your reflections. It feels so good to connect with people on this stuff instead of like ranting to my Pat. So like, thank you.
Let's let the conversation continue. Please, if you enjoyed listening, please contribute. Please post comments. We want to interact with you. This whole talk is going to be archived and it will be available online. We will have the link on our montrealfringe.ca page on the full master schedule. We're having this conversation again tomorrow, but in French. So please join our Francophone colleagues for that. Thank you to you for, I really appreciate everything that you've offered us. A lot to think about and to marinate on. I always talk about that. I'm like a steak, and you need to marinate. It can be tofu steak, that works too. But let's do that, and we'll see everyone tomorrow. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.